On the podcast today, I'm joined by NATALIE Germanos, who's a sports coach, sports broadcaster, more notably heard on SAFM and Radio 2000, as well as BBC's Test Match Special. So thank you for making time for me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And as a cricket lover, I'm sure you also share the sentiment of how excited we are to have cricket back on TV again.
Oh, it was so wonderful to sit and watch it, and because we all have the time to do it now, which is great. You can sit and watch a whole day and not feel guilty because that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be staying at home. It was wonderful to see it. It was wonderful to see also some really good Test cricket too, high standard of Test cricket, and I think it was something that is really good for the soul, and because we all, like you say, we all love cricket and we all have a passion for it, and to be have it back on our screens is I think it's important for the game itself, but also for obviously the viewers as well.
And that win, that first Test win between the West Indies and England, Jason Holder, what a performance! Definitely a standout from the last 2 years, if you're looking, especially in Test cricket, with his figures, amazing.
It's incredible. He's one of the best bowlers in the world at the moment, and he doesn't bowl with a lot of pace necessarily, but he makes it work. And if we actually look around the world, there's been a couple of bowlers like Mohammad Abbas, for example, who may not have a lot of pace, but they're effective. They're really effective. And the West Indies in the last couple of years haven't played nearly as much Test cricket as England. And yet they performed beautifully in that first Test match. Jason Holder, throughout his career, has had so much on his shoulders. And he carries it so well. He is this is just wonderful, gentle person. He always seems to have time for everybody in the media, the fans. He never seems to get irritated. And he takes on a lot, and he has right throughout, especially when he was first made captain back in 2015. So an incredible performer. I think he's a really good role model for the rest of the West Indies, and he leads that team beautifully at the moment.
Yeah, and we can only hope that the weather holds out here in the UK for the third and final one, because it's going to be a juicy one with one apiece at the moment.
I've heard the weather's not good, apparently. The prediction's not looking good.
Yeah, from Saturday it's not looking good. It looks like there's rain for the following 4 days. But hopefully, we don't know if they can get like 3 days in, maybe you might get a result. But I'm sure it'll be good nevertheless. And maybe just going back then into how you got into cricket and that. Where did that start? What sparked your passion in cricket?
My family played a lot of cricket. My dad played cricket as a youngster. He was actually a left-arm unorthodox bowler, and he played, a decent-ish level, club level. He went to watch a lot of games, and he had a couple of his own favourites, and he told us a lot of the stories of the players. And then my brothers got into the game as well, and I was fortunate enough that we had the facilities even to have a net in our backyard. We first had a lot of space, and then we were allowed to eventually make a net in the backyard. My mom eventually said, no, it's fine, don't worry, mess up the garden, it's okay, have the space. So we were lucky that we had those facilities. We're very privileged to have that, because it's an expensive sport to get into. And I think that's where it grew from, just playing backyard cricket, having some fun with it. South Africa getting back into the international frame as well, in particular with the men's cricket, and having the 92 World Cup, which was absolutely thrilling in so many ways, being able to witness it, listen to it on the radio, even during some school classes. We had our little radios with us and listening to it. Very naughty, but it was worth it. I think those sort of the story of the South African history and the cricket and the South African men in particular getting back into the international frame really sparked a passion for it.
And was it quite difficult for you as a lady and that playing cricket in a sport that I would say it hasn't pushed? It's only getting to a good stage now with the women's game. I know from back in my day playing in high school and that, I remember one friend who was a girl that would come and practice with the boys and that because she just wanted to play, but there was no such thing as a formal ladies team structure. But yeah, what was your experience with that?
I think we were quite lucky in that. I think it would have been my first year of what we call high school or secondary school. I was about 11 or 12 years old. I think it was about 94, if I remember the right year. Because South African cricket was obviously coming back into the international fold, I think the excitement of it, the euphoria of it was all there. And we had a women's team at that time. I think it went to the World Cup just a couple of years later. And that kind of sparked up a bit of interest with ladies, even in school level. And we played a six-a-side tournament. It wasn't proper formal cricket. We played six-a-side tournament, and then that sparked a little bit more interest, and then we got a league going. So through my high school career, we at least got to play some cricket. It was against probably 3 other schools, so it wasn't a lot of cricket, and we certainly didn't get the best of the facilities. We didn't get the best equipment. We had to share a lot, especially for people who couldn't afford it. So I was lucky that we still had something at school, and that helped a heck of a lot to be able to get an opportunities to play cricket, to play in the backyard with the boys, but then actually get to play with girls and not just being the one girl amongst all the boys. I did help a lot scoring with the boys team as well, so I was always sort of involved quite a bit. My brothers were involved. My brothers were pretty good cricketers, so it was kind of part of our everyday life. And I think in the beginning, I never really realized even the gender divide as much because we had those small opportunities. As you get older, you start to realize that I'm not going to be a formal playing career, unfortunately, out of it. And I'm not going to make money out of it. I need to make some kind of a living. So unfortunately, I had to move on from the aspirations of playing cricket and move it on to other things.
And well, it seems like it's worked out pretty well now being a commentator, and it seems like your career just keeps blossoming in that, and yeah, just hearing you more and more, which is great to see.
I've been so fortunate to get opportunities. I think that is the really important part of it. Obviously, you have to take those opportunities and do the work. But if you don't get given them in the first place, you can do all the work you want. It's going to be so difficult to go anyway. And I was given an opportunity at SABC back in 2005, where they were looking for more female commentators, and they gave me a couple of opportunities. They were happy with what they heard, and I got a contract, and they slowly introduced me. It wasn't a case of, all right, here you go, you're now on full time, you'll be on as many games as possible. It didn't work out like that. I just did some games in Johannesburg and in Centurion, where I stay. Didn't travel around the country for the first couple of years, and then eventually got into it. BBC gave me a couple of opportunities just a few years back. That sparked a little bit more, because then some people in the UK heard me, and I was able to do the 2017 Women's World Cup. So those opportunities have fortunately snowballed. Coronavirus is kind of like a little bit of brakes on it now, but all in all, I'm very lucky to have had those opportunities, and fortunately, it's still going pretty well at the moment.
And we look at the women's game. It feels like ages ago, but there was a women's T20 World Cup that happened this year, and yeah, the crowds have been growing. There's been more following, more investment into the game. If you just look at the crowd that was at the final, just an amazing picture to see. Just the actual shots in that from the game. And if we just look at the SA women's side, how well they did, and how close they were just to getting to that final. What are your thoughts on the progress in the women's game over the last few years, and maybe what would you like to see going forward, especially from a South African perspective?
I think what's important to note is, I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, oh, the women's game is improving so much and the players are improving. The skills have always been there. And women's cricket has always been of a high standard. And probably in many ways, if you take into account what the men have had at their disposal, in a way, the women's game has probably done better in some aspects, because they've never played it professionally. They didn't have it every day. They didn't have all the best facilities. They didn't have all the best trainers and all those kind of things. And they didn't grow up necessarily with it through the age groups. So they faced a lot more opposition to actually get into a national side, to be able to travel. So it hasn't been easy for women's cricket, but the skills have always been there. And there's always been some really tight contested matches. Obviously, Australia, England, they've been pretty strong for many years. But now that we've had the advent of more professional game, we are now at least getting an opportunity to see it, being able to watch it, and that encourages more participation, which is huge for the women's game. But also, point of view of the skill set in terms of being able to focus just on cricket, fitness has improved, which is great. Then, and as a result, the fielding has improved as well, because we know those are things you have to work really hard at, and it takes time, and those are things you can also control. You don't have to be the most talented person to be the best fielder. You just got to work really hard. So we're seeing those sort of things improving a lot, and to see 86,000 people at the MCG in a final tells you how far that women's game has come in terms of support and in terms of professionalism. And obviously it's worth putting it on TV and giving it that coverage. What I would like to see in the future is a more structured domestic system all around the world, in particular in South Africa. I'd love to see an opportunity for the players to get paid, even if it starts out at a minimum amount on contracts. It gives them something to work towards. It gives an opportunity for them to free up some time to spend playing cricket, getting coached. A lot of the girls have to pay for private coaching. Very few can afford that. It's incredibly expensive. So from their point of view, I'd like to see maybe just the more professionalized domestic system. I think that will give a bigger pool to actually pick from, and it'll just get better and better from a women's game point of view. And you'll see crowds like that will just become the norm, obviously, depending on the capacity of the stadiums.
And do you think, like what they're doing in Australia now with the Women's Big Bash League and that, do you think that, or that kind of model could be tried to move it to a South African perspective kind of thing? Because it seems like there are maybe a few steps, and maybe here in the UK as well with the women's cricket, are probably a few steps ahead than other international countries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the KSL in England was very successful. I know things are changing now, and they've got the new elite domestic setup, and it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Obviously, we will only know in a few years' time how that all goes. It's going to take time, but they are contracting players now domestically, and that's wonderful from England's point of view. Australia have definitely shown the way with the WBBL. There's no doubt about it. The exposure that their domestic players get from the international players coming over is huge, and vice versa. It's a really good exposure for the international players coming through. I mean, you've got players from Sri Lanka coming over to Australia and having an opportunity to play there, which is huge for Sri Lanka, and it's something for them then to work towards as well. Obviously, the fact that they can get paid makes a big difference too, because let's face it, it costs to live. We need to have a job and we need to have some money coming in. And I think if South Africa were able to adopt a similar style, it'll take quite a lot, because you've got to have a good base of domestic players. Because even if you have, let's say, 4 teams of 15 players each, and 5 of them are internationals, it still means you've got to have 40 domestic players. And that's only for 4 teams. That's not a lot of teams even. So you still have to have a good base of domestic players as well, unless you allow more international players, but then it defeats the purpose, obviously, of having that league. So I would like to see them build up to it. I know South Africa in the last year or so have had the weekend Super League, which they've had a couple of times. They had 4 teams all playing each other. It is just over a weekend. There's not international players coming in either, but it's a start. And I think if they build on that and it gets bigger and bigger and explodes, who knows what might happen. And they might even have a women's IPL coming up in the next couple of years too, which would be massive for the game.
Yeah, I think that would be. And I think as well, going on with that is that there needs to be, from a Cricket South Africa perspective, that investment in the grassroots level, to get girls that are young in primary school playing cricket, so that you obviously get that talent going upwards. But as well, like you're saying, there also needs to be that financial reward at the domestic and international level, saying that, yeah, if you are a really good women's cricketer, and that you will get paid for it and you will be able to live off it, like the men do, kind of thing. So yeah, hopefully that gap is bridged in the near future.
Yeah, the ICC were looking to launch the Under-19 World Cup for women next year. I don't know what's going to happen now, obviously, with the pandemic that's happening. Sadly, that's nothing, they can't do anything about it. But that is really promising, because it'll force countries to make sure that they've got some kind of domestic setup with youngsters if they want to take part and have a team that can compete at that level.
Yeah, and the Black Lives movement and that has been sort of spread across the world recently, and it's come into sports now, and in cricket more recently. We've heard revelations from the likes of Ebony Rainsford-Brent and Michael Holding and Mackay and Tini even more recently, in that of their experiences in that, and quite emotional stuff. I watched the Sky cricket thing with Ebony and Michael, and it's very stirring to watch it. But I just wanted to know your thoughts on it, and your thoughts on what Cricket South Africa has done so far. Do you think it's enough? Is it a step in the right direction? It's quite a long question. And then going on from that is, with the transformation and quotas that Cricket South Africa has put in place, do you think that's worked? Do you think it's been a positive step, or could there have been something else that would have worked better, better results?
Yeah, I think if we look at obviously the Black Lives Matter, I think a lot of it, as you say, within cricket circles, it was sparked because of what we saw from Michael Holding and Ebony Rainsford-Brent. And, I know both of them very well, and there's nothing that I can say that I can't say anything better about them. They're amazing people. And that was very sincere. What they put out there was incredibly sincere, which is, I think, why it was so effective, because it was totally honest. Mackay and Tini, exactly the same thing. I worked with him for years at SABC, and he is a wonderful person. Treats everybody with the same respect, and that was, again, sincere. That was his experience. And I know there's a lot of people that didn't necessarily agree with it, and they said, well, why is he only coming out now? Well, he has a choice to come out when he wants to and when he's ready for it. And it was his story, and nobody can tell him otherwise, because that's what he experienced. And I think if I look at sort of how Cricket South Africa handled it, I think they were a little bit maybe late in saying what they were going to do in terms of the 3-team cricket that they just played. For example, like, I know they were asked, are you going to be having a Black Lives Matter badge, for example, on the kit? And they said, well, the kit's already out, so it's gone for printing already, but we are trying to work out measures. Now, it doesn't take much to do an armband, as they eventually did. So that could have just been the suggestion in the first place. The kit's already out, so it's not going to be something on the kit, but we will wear an armband or something like that. It doesn't take much to figure that out. So I was a bit sad at how they handled that initially. But I was really glad to see that it was front and center for that 3TC cricket, which they played all in aid of the Solidarity Fund. I loved that it was there, obviously, with everybody taking a knee, the armbands, they spoke about it. I think it was really good to see that it was very visual. And that's really important. Obviously, it matters now what happens next. They've got to take the next steps. It's not easy with situations as they are, because of obviously all the lockdown situations. But I'd be interested to see how they take this forward. We have had press releases from all of the unions within South Africa as to how they support Black Lives Matter and how important it is to them, and how important it is for them to say no to racism and not tolerate racism in any aspect. I think they need to now find a better way to report racism. Neil Manthorpe, actually, one of my colleagues at SABC, I know he's worked on the BBC as well before and has been a commentator for many years, wrote a column saying, well, you report match fixing, and there's a proper way to do it. You taught about it all the time, and you know the steps. Why not have the same thing when it comes to racism or even sexism? Same thing. Have steps, have a way to just, all right, here we go, this is what we're going to do, we're going to report it. This is your education on this subject. And nobody should feel scared to report any incident that they ever feel marginalized in any way. I would like to see that maybe going forward. People have even spoken about a roundtable where literally everyone comes and just tells their story, tells their truth, and comes out with it and be as honest as possible. And I think that could work as well. They've got to do it in the right ways. And I suppose nobody will ever know what the right way really is, but the most important thing is to make people feel as comfortable as possible. I would like to see that. I think that's important. When we look at sort of measures in the past to come to a state of equality within South African cricket, we're nowhere near that. And if anybody says that we are, I think we got real problems, because if we look at South Africa and the demographics of the country, our team is not representative of the country, and there isn't, you can't say that. And whether you're talking about the national team, the provincial teams, the lower teams, the club teams, all of those, you can't say that they're representative of the country. We're not where we should be at the moment. I would love to see a day where you could say, here's the big pool of players, you're picking from everybody possible, and even if it ends up that there's still 11 white players, which is not going to happen, it's not actually possible, but even if it happens that way, you know you've picked from the entire pool from the country, then it's different. But they're not doing that at the moment. They're not at that stage. It is difficult because financially it is an expensive sport, as I've said before. It's difficult to get it into schools, all those things. It needs to come from a school level as well, and not just from club, not just from provincial level. The quota system hasn't been in for that long. It's only been a few years. And I think that's what's important for people to understand. It's going to take a while. And they have tweaked it all the time, and they've upped the numbers. And I think it is working in many ways, because I don't think there's a few players we may never have seen. I'm not too sure we may have seen somebody like Andile Pehlukwayo, because he doesn't come from a lot of money, for example. He had a hockey background too. I mean, he might have even eventually gone and played hockey. I don't know if we might have seen somebody like him. And now you can't even call him a quota player. He deserves to be there, and he's worked hard to be there, and he's shown results, and he's a very handy cricketer. I think we would have missed out on a few players if we didn't have the quota system, in particular coming up the ranks through the provincial and franchise system. The one negative that I have with the quota system, and it's something that Makai and Tini actually said to me, was that if you have a quota of, let's say, 3 black players in the side, a coach or an administration or selectors or whoever may only look for 3. And not actually say, oh, well, we can have 4, we can have 5, we can have 11. It doesn't really matter, as long as they are the best players on the park. But when you do have a quota, you might get to a stage where some, not all, will say, all right, well, I've fulfilled my 3, I've done enough. And it never really is going to be enough. We need to continually bring the people from previously disadvantaged backgrounds through the system and give opportunities. Like I said to you earlier, from my story, that was one of the reasons I am where I am, because I got opportunities. And then it's up to the player to take the opportunity, obviously. But I think most who get to a level where they're getting those opportunities will try their hardest to take that opportunity, because you will have that hunger to stay in what is a very difficult career. It's not an easy career, it's constant pressure. But yeah, I think the quota system, people need to understand, it's very new. It's not been around for very long. And we're trying to correct years and years and years of mistreatment, of wrongdoing, of segregation, all those. And we're trying to do it as quickly as possible. And it's not an easy thing to do. So yes, there's negatives to it, but I think there are definitely positives to it as well. And I believe we would have missed out on a few players without it.
Yeah, I think as well, what I would like to see more of is, going back to that, is the investment in the grassroots. I follow Gary Kirsten's foundation and that, and his academy, and all the work he does down in the Cape and that, in disadvantaged areas and that, and the kind of players, and yeah, they post videos and that of some of the kids, and just how really amazing cricketers they are. So I think that's something from my perspective that needs to be more done for. And like you're saying, the cost of playing cricket is very high. Equipment is expensive, so it's just getting that equipment, good equipment at that, to players out in the rural locations and that, so that they can enjoy the same quality as everyone else, kind of thing. But yeah, like you also say as well, it hasn't been since. Yeah, South African cricket has come out of that isolation. It hasn't been that long, really. It's so for a team that's been out, what now, closing in on 30 years, compared to say and Australia and England that haven't had as bad past or recent past as South Africa can say it has, and yet Cricket South Africa or the Proteas and that are still up there with the best. But yeah, I have to agree and say that there needs to be some more time, and I think as these processes are brought in, you can only find out how they're working once you've seen the results, kind of thing. So you do need time to look and say, yes, this worked, no, it didn't. What's the next step forward going forward?
I think in some ways, to explain it, I know a lot of people will say straight away, politics doesn't have a place in sport. We're not really talking about politics. We're actually just talking about people. We are talking about race. We're just talking about everyday life. You look at England, for example, they have struggled for many years to find a spinner that they would want, for example. And that, again, takes development. It takes finding ways to bring it through grassroots, schools level. And even in England, they're having a problem with regards to schools. It's only in the private schools where you're finding cricket, and it's difficult because you're not getting kids from the public schools. So it's similar in that sense. Obviously, our history is incredibly different, but it is similar in that sense that it requires development, it requires money, it requires identification, it requires opportunities from people who don't have those opportunities right now, basically.
Yeah, that was quite a surprise to me when I moved to England and just finding out a bit more about how things work here, and especially in the schooling sense, is quite a lot of schools don't offer sports. It's all extra mural kind of thing, so you've got to go find teams to join in that. Whereas in South Africa, generally every high school, primary school, and that has its cricket team. So that was quite an interesting thing. And yeah, like you say, it does create its own issues and problems in that. And maybe wrapping up then, what are you hoping for the rest of 2020 when it comes to cricket and that? And yeah, do we know when South Africa may play another game? How are you keeping busy work-wise, being a freelancer?
Yeah, freelancing is tough sometimes. It's great. It's great sometimes. There's a lot of good things about it. You choose your own time, and you can go on holiday when you feel like it and those type of things. But obviously, freelancing now is pretty tough, and just trying to keep busy with, I think, general things like research and keeping up on stories and those type of things, and trying a few little new projects and that type of thing. I've done a lot of projects at home, DIY projects and painting things and that type of thing, trying to keep busy. But yeah, fortunately, in terms of our season, obviously, it hasn't affected too badly. It's possible that it's going to, because of the home season coming up pretty quickly. We're almost into August already. England being in a very different situation where it was under threat that the whole season would be out the window. But it did mean, obviously, that a few international tours had to be cancelled. South African women were supposed to go through to the West Indies in May. The men's team was supposed to going through now, actually, to the West Indies. They are looking at the South African women going over to play against England. They're going to I know they're back and forth with it. It looks like India won't be part of that tri-series, which is a bit sad. Because they were looking to make it into a full tri-series, which would have been great competition. But it looks like the BCCI are saying, unfortunately, no, they won't be able to travel. Hopefully we will have some kind of cricket here in South Africa. Again, the Indian men's team was meant to come to South Africa, but that looks like that's also been put on the back burner because of travel and obviously the restrictions and those kind of things. It's not an easy thing to do logistically. But I think in terms of the domestic season, the men's are hoping to get up and running hopefully by October, November. I may have to still push it back a little bit, possibly, depending on what happens here in South Africa and when we reach our peak, because we're not quite there yet, but we're almost there. I think for the South African women's team, they'll be preparing for the World Cup next year. The 50 over World Cup is right now. That's still going ahead. We're expecting another announcement in the next couple of weeks. We don't know what that's going to be, but for now, it is still going ahead. The men's T20 World Cup has been suspended till the next year, so those plans will all change. We may be seeing an IPL possibly, so maybe the players will even be going over for that too. So we wait and see. It's all up in the air, basically. Yeah. I feel sorry for them because it's difficult to train, to prepare, to I feel sorry for the fitness trainers. You've got to make sure that they are fit and ready for that time. It's not easy to make sure that the periodization is all right and you're ready for when is needed. So it's all sort of, take it day by day. You wake up one day and then, okay, this has been cancelled or this is going ahead. And you just kind of hope for the best, I suppose, and hope that everybody comes through it okay.
Yeah, hopefully we are able to see some cricket soon. And yeah, I guess from your perspective, I'm sure you can't wait as well to get behind a mic as well and start commentating on it. But yeah, thank you again for joining me today. Muchly appreciate your time.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.